everybody wants to lead until you lead, till you have to lead, right? And then sometimes the things that are associated with leadership become a lot to kind of carry, right? So, I mean, I think to me, getting that first check, getting that first payroll run, the responsibility of leadership, owning the outcomes, to me, all kind of come together as, a piece of entrepreneurship and, some of the core tenets that I think are responsible, at least been, pretty important in my journey.
Welcome to Off the Record, a podcast featuring leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, which publishes the Indiana 250, a list of the most influential business people in Indiana. Welcome to Off the Record, a podcast featuring leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, which publishes the Indiana 250, a list of the most influential business people in the state of Indiana. Today, I'm joined by Justin Christian, founder and CEO of Indianapolis-based information technology consulting and workforce management company BCforward, one of the largest Black-owned businesses in the United States. Justin grew up in Greenwich Village in New York City, the son of a jazz club manager. He wanted to become a professional trumpet player, so he signed up for the music program at DePauw University in Greencastle and moved to Indiana to pursue his dream. But rather than pursuing a professional music career, Justin opted in college to switch his major to computer science and interned at Eli Lilly and Co, which ultimately led to a job offer after graduation. Justin worked at Lilly for a couple of years before deciding to strike out on his own as an entrepreneur and start a computer consulting firm. He and partner Tony Booker started the two-man firm Booker and Christian with about $1,500 and their personal credit cards. The idea was to create a small firm known for great customer service. A little over 25 years later, it's a global IT consulting and workforce management services provider with 5,000 employees spread across a network of offices, including its headquarters here in Indianapolis and its development center in India with more than 1,000 employees. Justin and his wife, Darrianne, who met at DePauw, have dedicated themselves to supporting their community and their alma mater, including the creation of the Justin and Darrianne Christian Center for Diversity and Inclusion at DePauw University, which focuses on making DePauw a more welcoming place for minority students. Justin serves on the boards of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, First Internet Bancorp, the Lumina Foundation, and the Board of Trustees at DePauw University. He was named Ernst & Young National Entrepreneur of the Year in 2020, quite an honor. And last year, even better honor, IBJ named Justin the inaugural winner of the Mickey Maurer Entrepreneur of the Year Award. Justin, I'm so pleased to have you on Off the Record. Thanks for joining me today.
Nate, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Always good to catch up with you.
Well, appreciate it. Well, I want to talk a little bit about your background, of course, and how a New York kid ended up studying at DePauw and then, of course, founding a major business enterprise here in Indianapolis. But it sounds like the beginning started with the trumpet, which is why we've got a little prop here. But it sounds like it started with the trumpet. But tell us what it was like growing up the son of a jazz club operator and how you ended up loving the trumpet and ended up here in Indianapolis at DePauw.
Well, excited to share my journey. And when I saw the trumpet here, I joked. I said, "Okay, hopefully nobody's asking me to play that today because I think the podcast would go in a much different direction." But yeah, my path to Indiana, it wasn't necessarily, I guess, on the roadmap, right? Not quite completely as random as it might seem. My father spent a couple of years out here when I was in high school, so I did have an opportunity to kind of visit out here. And then heard a little bit about DePauw, through that connection. As you mentioned, I went to high school for performing arts, school called LaGuardia High School of Performing Arts, majored in, instrumental music, focused on the trumpet at the time. And, I thought that would be kind of a path I would go down. A lot of famous people came out of LaGuardia. Actually, Adrian Brody was one of my classmates, just received the Oscar.
Wow.
A couple nights ago.
Neat.
And So, being around people like that, who wasn't going to be a star, right? And, as you start to kind of, continue to practice, you realize, man, there are people that are a whole nother level. And, I realized, okay, man, this might not be a way that I can kind of earn a living for myself. So, found DePauw and fell in love with the place when I got there. And, why would you think a kid from New York City would kind of, gravitate to a place like Greencastle?
Yeah.
Certainly a lot different than what I was used to. But I was at that point in time in my life just looking for something different, right? And, looking to mix it up with a different group of people. And, had a variety of great relationships growing up in the city, but, great people at DePauw, great professors. And I mean, DePauw was so focused on just academics and, got a chance to throw myself into classes that, were just really interesting to me, around a bunch of people who were just really trying to, push themselves in a variety of different ways. And it was a great experience. Had established some great friendships, with not only classmates, but also, professors. And, initially started off with this idea of, majoring in music when I got there, but that transitioned into, a degree in computer science. And that was a little bit random. Had a roommate who was majoring in comp sci, and he said, hey, maybe we can do this together. And, one thing led to another, and something about kind of the improvisation of music and kind of, IT and technology and algorithm development, it somehow all clashed for me. And, here we are 30 years later, and, who would have thought, right?
So your father was involved with jazz clubs. Were you exposed to jazz at an early age, or did you?
Yeah.
Did you exposed to musicians at an early age?
Yeah. So you mentioned Greenwich Village, and I mean that's kind of just the center of the bohemian world, right? I mean, artists, musicians. And so, I grew up right across the street from a world famous jazz club called the Village Vanguard. And he worked at a club, not the Vanguard, but something very similar, very hot at the time. So, it wasn't uncommon for me to kind of just go hang out with him. The music sets would usually start 7:00. They'd have 3 sets a night. So you get a 7:00 show, then there'd be like a 9:00 show, then like the 1 a.m. show. So, when my mother was out of town, I might be able to kind of hang out there pretty late. And it was a lot of fun. And I mean, you got a chance to meet, people that, world famous musicians, right? I mean, just folks that, would just kind of completely blow you away. I mean, geniuses.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just kind of really sit down with them and talk to them about just life and music. And I mean, it was to be a high school kid or a high school age person, kind of just being around that environment, man. I just learned so much.
Yeah.
Right. And actually my youngest daughter, her name is Ellington. And I actually had an opportunity to meet Duke Ellington's grandson, who was actually a bartender at the club.
Oh, wow.
And I remember interviewing him one night about his grandfather, Duke Ellington. And he actually sat there. He said, okay, ask the questions. And he actually wrote down the answers to the questions. So, I mean, I was just asking him random stuff like, hey, what was it like growing up around, Duke Ellington, and just kind of, just things that you would, think as his grandson he would know. And lo and behold, I kept those cards, right? So now that I have a daughter named Ellington, like it was just kind of like
cool.
just magical that I'm able to kind of share that with her now and be like, hey, here's the person that you were actually named after.
Cool.
So, man, so my dad worked at places like that, and he's just a great guy. He was actually a social worker who kind of fell into managing jazz clubs. And my mother was a teacher. So, I mean, they kind of actually came from more like a social work field, but he just had a huge personality, and he really served him well as the host of a jazz club because, he'd do everything from, figuring out how to get people seats at these, hot shows. And
sure.
Remember he told me a story one night where a couple came in and they had a reservation, but, it was packed and they couldn't, quite get them into a table by themselves. He said, hey, well, I'm going to put you at a table with another couple that's there. I'm sure you'll like, to kind of just mix it up with them. And they were like, well, we really prefer our own set. He said, well, hey, I'll pay for your meal if you'll do this. And the person he sat him next to was Mick Jagger, right? And his wife at the time. So, stories like that, cool. Just, kind of just peppered my upbringing.
Yeah. So when you decided to give up the trumpet and give up music, was that a surprise to your parents or your family?
I mean, they knew how good I was, right? I mean, I'm saying like, or how good I was not, right? So, I mean, there was certainly a passion, but man, when you're talking about people like who do this for a living, even the people who probably are not the most well-known people, the amount of work and the amount of just natural talent that goes into something like that, I just realized, man, I just didn't have that extra gear, right? And I still got a love for it, and it's great to see, people that I grew up with doing that as a occupation now. But man, I just love being a fan of the art now, and a fan of just kind of some of my buddies and seeing what they're out there doing now.
Is there a decent jazz vibe in the city here in Indianapolis?
Man, look, Indiana Avenue, is like world known. Folks like West Montgomery, like when you look back at the history of folks that kind of came through all around the Walker Building, there are some powerhouse folks that kind of came out of Indianapolis. So, we got the Jazz Kitchen, and, they're, big name, Terrence Blanchard and, Wynton Marsalis was up at in Carmel at the Palladium not too long ago. And then obviously we host the Jazz Festival every year. So, there's a lot of history, and it's nice to see how that has evolved throughout the years. And there's still a pretty nice presence here today.
So you graduate DePauw, and instead of doing working on the trumpet and your music work, you switch to computer science, and you go to Lilly. You meet your wife at DePauw too. Darrianne went to DePauw, correct?
Yeah.
So you meet her. You go to Lilly, and then you get this wild idea to be an entrepreneur and to start something. And when you came home one day from Lilly and talked to Darrianne, what was her thoughts about you venturing off, leaving a wonderful company,
Absolutely.
like Lilly, and starting something fresh?
Well, listen, Eli Lilly was great to me, and Eli Lilly gave me an internship when I was in college, and that led to kind of my first real job, and just the opportunity to kind of get that first real work experience at a place like that with such great culture. That was just a great opportunity, and kind of just a great training ground for me. And I remember, telling some of my managers there, I said, man, I'm having a great experience here. I feel at some point in time, I'd love to own my own business. And I remember I had a great manager at the time. Her name was Becky Perez. I remember Becky, and we still actually keep in contact, at least online today. And I remember telling her, this aspiration that I had. She says, maybe Justin, maybe you should try to do that now. And I was like, well, I'm certainly not ready to do that now. I'm kind of thinking, let's get more experience, save up a little more resources to kind of really invest. She says, yeah, but then you'll have more responsibility too. Right. And she said, I've seen a lot of people that have aspired to do something like that. They get those golden handcuffs, things start to go well, and, they're just never really able to kind of make that leap.
Right.
Why don't you try to do it now? And, in her own way, really encouraged me, but kind of gave me, just the wild idea that, hey, maybe let's go out here and try to see what happens. And I guess if worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, maybe Lilly will hire me back, or maybe I'll be able to figure something else out. So, that's kind of how it got started. I was able to get involved in a package called SAP, which was an enterprise package that was a German company that, was really trying to implement this software across a lot of global corporations. I met my business partner, a guy by the name of Tony Bucher, great guy, super smart, Indiana, Purdue grad. And the two of us were able to kind of come together at the right time, had a couple bucks, threw that together and started this company, which just kind of evolved to what it is today.
Yeah. And so I read that when you explained to your wife, Darrianne, that you were going to start this, there was maybe a little hesitation about telling her family about it. Is that?
Yeah. So hey, Darrianne grew up in Gary, right? She grew up tough and super smart girl. She was recruited by the CIA out of high school. And I don't know how that happens, but it's a legit story.
Yeah.
And, obviously she had worked hard to put herself in the position and decided to hook up with this crazy dude from New York City who sometimes played the trumpet and, got this great job at Eli Lilly, and all of a sudden he was going to leave and start his own business. So, she had two brothers who were, very protective of her. And, so, I had to just kind of make sure that, at least they knew I had a plan and had, our collective best interests in mind. So yeah, we have a lot of fun. We kind of look back on some of those stories.
Yeah. So, Darrianne hasn't had necessarily a formal role with BCforward, but I know she's been a big part through the years. How do you describe how she's helped you grow to today? What is such a unique and large enterprise?
Oh, well, so many stories, and I mean, her contribution, it's priceless. You can't necessarily put a number on what she's been able to do for me, both personally and professionally. And, I often joke back to, in those initial stages, look, we bootstrapped the business, right? So, and I'm not saying that's the right way to start a business, but that's what we did. We threw our own resources in and you had to make a little bit more than you spent, and that was your profit. And that's kind of what you lived off of. And you reinvested a couple bucks and, one thing led to another. But in the initial stages, in our attempts to demonstrate credibility with some, potential customers, we didn't have a lot of employees. So, there were times when I would ask Darrianne to go on these sales calls, and I'd say, listen, use your maiden name so they don't think that, we're related, because it's probably look pretty hokey if it's husband and wife in here trying to, sell this whatever solution. Right. And so, she would go in and, her maiden name was Howard. It's Darrianne Howard. And, we kind of act like we had this, strictly professional relationship. And so I often say that, Darrianne was the pinch hitter. Like, she was the one who, we'd bring in the clutch when we kind of really needed, someone to kind of come through. So, and she's continued to serve in that role for us in a variety of capacities, throughout the last 25 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you, of course, grew the company from a 2-person shop to what today is a significant enterprise. And I've always heard, and just knowing you a bit, I know that culture is really important to you. Company culture is important to you, and you have a reputation for having a very authentic and creative culture within your company. But for someone who started from scratch, an entrepreneur with two guys, how did you develop a company culture and today take from that small company to now what is a very significant large company?
It continues to evolve, right? And you start off a company, it's 2 people, you can touch everything, right? And you hire a few employees, and we can touch them and we can get to know them, and we understand kind of what motivates them and what's important to them. And I always used to get so excited around the holidays because I enjoy, I like giving gifts, right? Yeah. And I always remember kind of going to the mall and, wanting to pick out a very special gift for every employee because I wanted to see their face when they got it, right? And it's just small things like that, to let people know how important they were to me, not only professionally, but personally, right?
Yeah.
And so when you kind of think about the culture, it was very organic. We focused on diversity. And when I say diversity, it's I just liked having a diverse group of people around me, right? Yeah. And that's diversity from all different perspectives.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Diversity, ethnic diversity, geographic diversity of thought, right? Just different experiences, all that type of stuff like that. So, that kind of naturally grew into a set of values and principles. Always wanted to make sure we went hard for our customers, right? Yeah. I remember I went to a class one time at Dartmouth and the professor said, fall in love with your customers, right? And so this idea of no matter what, making sure that this customer understood that we were there for them because we weren't big at the time, but hey, you were going to get a group of people that were absolutely passionate about doing the best possible work we could do.
Yeah.
And if we failed, you knew we failed swinging hard. Right. And, so eventually, customers continue to get confidence in your ability. People get motivated by that culture. They get motivated by that closest, and that continued to feed itself. Right.
Yeah.
Now, as you grow, that's where the challenges start to come in because you can't touch everything anymore. Right. And a lot of times you're hiring people that you've never physically even seen, right? In all parts of the world. And so how do you continue to scale that culture in a manner that gets you some of those same outcomes that you got when you were small? And that's where it starts to get tough, right? So that's where, hiring the right leadership, making sure that they understood kind of what some of those core principles were when you first started the business and what some of those core things were that were important to you when you first started the business. And hopefully they can continue to push those things into how we scale the business, not only here in the United States, but all across the world.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question, which is on your leadership philosophy. And talk a little bit about how that has evolved. And because it's had to, I know, over the years. And I'm sure it has something to do with the kind of people that you hire too, as you just, kind of referred to. But talk a little bit about your philosophy and how you lead today.
It's not cookie cutter, and sometimes when I think about kind of my experiences, I often wish that in some ways I might have had the opportunity to kind of grow up in a corporation a little bit longer to kind of establish some of those tried and true management principles under somebody else's leadership, and then use those kind of in an entrepreneurial setting, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of what I have learned, I've kind of learned kind of on the job, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So kind of building the plane as I'm going down the runway. And I'm not saying that arrogantly. I'm saying that like just in a real humble manner that, man, I haven't always got it right. Sure. And, there's been a lot of times on paper when I felt like, man, I've hired the absolutely right person and, great person, just not the right person for our particular environment. And then there's been other times when I felt like I've put somebody in a leadership position that was the wrong choice and they've just completely blown me away, right? So, trying to figure out, what were some of the things that we've done right? What were some of the things that we've done wrong? And how do you kind of feed into your people in a manner that they continue to stay motivated and want to do great work for you and your company and your customers?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've really tried to do, I would say within more recent years is really try to feed into the success of my employees and specifically really try to feed into the success of my leaders, right? You hire people and say, man, I want you to be a CEO at some point in time, and, a lot of times when we're hiring folks today, we don't expect everybody to retire from the company from BCforward, right?
Sure.
I mean, we hope that they'll stay as long as they want to and as long as it makes sense. But man, if I can set somebody up for success long-term, even beyond BCforward, man, that's success, right? And if they can be an ambassador for me and say, man, I had a great experience there. And Justin, the team over there, they were great to me. And they're able to kind of be ambassadors out in a new environment for us. That kind of creates almost a cycle that kind of feeds itself, right? So,
that's right.
And like I said, no cookie cutter approach for us. And at some point in time, I've also had to kind of realize what my limitations are, right? And I remember I was listening to a speech that Dave Ricks gave when he received his honor as the Indiana Business Hall of Fame. And he said, he talked about Eli Lilly, and he said, got to recognize Eli Lilly was probably the most successful entrepreneur in Indiana's history, right? And he said, at some point in time, the Lilly family made the decision to hire professional management, right? And just talked about that recognition of realizing at some point in time, you got to realize maybe the company's outgrown your skill set, right? And so, trying to make sure that I'm stepping aside at the right time and allowing other leaders to kind of come up and kind of really take this organization forward. I think the thing I would love to be able to look back on and see a generational success story of BCforward where other folks are really kind of taking the organization forward in a manner that I'm not capable of doing. Right?
Yeah, I think that's the sign of a great leader. You realize your limitations and you hire for the things that you aren't as strong at, and so I completely can relate to that. I try to do that myself. It's sometimes better than
man. You do a great job.
We try.
Man. Yeah.
Well, most entrepreneurs who have been at it long enough, like you have. You experience some ups and downs, and not everything goes in a straight line up, right? So I'm curious, when you look back over the years and you look at some of the things that didn't go well, like what are there any challenges or failures that you that's kind of stick out as like, okay, that was one hell of a learning experience. I'm not going to do that again.
Oh, well, okay. How long do we have? Right. How long do you have?
Yeah.
That's a setup question. Well, I'm not sure if I could talk about this, but Nate, our relationship goes way back, right? Even, pre-IBJ.
Right.
I remember one time I said, Nate, I got to set up an offshore center. And somebody suggested maybe setting something up in Russia.
That's right.
Right. And in a previous life, you had done some work over in Russia.
That's
and,
right.
We exchanged some contacts. And, next thing I know, I jumped on a plane. I was over walking around Russia. And man, it was an interesting place even back then. And this was probably like, I'd say maybe 2003, 2004 timeframe. So there was kind of a sliver of time where a lot of U.S. business folks were kind of, seeing what they can do in that part of the world. And so my first offshore development center was in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember having a team of about 40 people over there. And there were a lot of benefits to working in that part of the world with the talent that was available over there. However, there were certain challenges, and I say benefits were extremely smart people, highly educated in a lot of sciences, but there was, I guess, an inflexibility maybe to kind of, how they would get their work done, which at that point in time in my evolution didn't necessarily translate into kind of that entrepreneurial mindset that I was trying to, grow within my organization. So I wouldn't say St. Petersburg was a failure because I learned a lot there. I met a lot of great people, and kind of it really established for me that, hey, we can go out here and do some things that maybe aren't necessarily conventional, right? And so at some point in time, pivoted St. Petersburg to Hyderabad, India, and which has been a phenomenal success. We've been in Hyderabad for close to 15 years now, and but we don't have Hyderabad unless we have St. Petersburg, right? So, while there might have been obstacles kind of in that initial journey, sometimes through those obstacles, we learn things that we're able to kind of take to a whole nother level.
Yeah, for sure. Just that experience of interacting with a totally different culture and a foreign environment, I'm sure carried over to the success you've seen in India.
Absolutely. It was interesting being a person of color in St. Petersburg.
I think I tried to warn you on that. I hope I did effectively because I know it was.
Yeah. I mean, man, it was. I remember. I mean, really, you could be there for days and not see another person of color, right?
Right.
And that was. I mean, there was a certain intensity about that,
For
right?
sure.
I mean, just kind of like
sure.
I wouldn't say a tension, but I mean, it was just like noticeable. Right. And so I remember like at one point in time, like I bumped into like some African guys and I was like pretty excited to see them. Right. And I was like, I kind of remember like almost like running over to them, like trying to give them like a head nod. Like, and it was like, they kind of looked at me like, hey, we don't know you guys. So, but let's just say after a certain period of time, I was ready to get back to, the diversity of Indianapolis.
100%. I can understand. I know. So tell me about, I always am interested, especially with entrepreneurs, to understand, what makes an entrepreneur. In other words, are you born to be an entrepreneur? Is it something in life that happens or an experience that you have where you become a risk taker? For you, what trait or what experience when you were growing up or maybe in college, but what made you say, you know what, I don't need to work for somebody else. It's great. I had great experiences, but I'm gonna go out and venture on my own. Is there? How would you describe that?
Different people probably describe it in different ways. I mean, I think there are a few things I might touch on. I remember how excited I was the first time I was able to pay myself, and it didn't really matter how much it was, right? And I mean, different people start this journey in different ways, right? I mean, there are private equity backed entrepreneurs, right? And some people go into this with a phenomenal business plan and objectives and a board. And that wasn't my journey. I mean, I remember how excited I was when we got that first invoice ready to go. And I think my first invoice to a customer was like $700, right? And I actually bumped into the guy who owns that company recently, and I was telling him this, and I was saying, yeah, I think we sold like 7 hours of work, like for like 70, well, was it $70 an hour? Somehow with the math is $100 an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was like, $700. We sent that invoice out, and, but then to kind of run payroll, and then cut yourself that first paycheck, that was like exciting to me. Right. Other parts of it, like I do like the idea of being personally accountable. Right.
Yeah.
And, I often say, look, I own it. I own this. If we make a mistake, if we fail, it is my responsibility.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying we as a team, we all have certain components of this that, ultimately this person's responsible for making sure that this piece of the project happens. This person's responsible for making sure that this piece of the company's operating. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never deflect responsibility if we fail a customer on anyone else. I'll take that bullet, right? And I mean, like, while that can be a lot to carry, I think there's a certain responsibility in that, look, I mean, there's, there is a certain enjoyment in just that process.
Yeah.
Right. That,
knowing it stops with you, and, that success and failure. I mean, of course, success has a lot of, a big tent and a lot of people involved, but you want to make sure that things are going well, and I do think there's something to that in terms of going out, waking up every morning and realizing you get a lot of responsibility, and to your point, like holding yourself accountable to making sure things go well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, listen, nobody's going to force you to get up in the morning and go into the office, right? I mean, nobody's going to force you to stay up, late at night and re-review the financials, or look at a proposal that needs to go out, or just kind of fine-tune what you're going to say to an important customer or important group of employees. If you decide that you're tired and you just don't want to get it done, I mean, that's on you, but ultimately you bear the weight of, if that doesn't go well, you only have yourself to blame.
Right.
And a lot of times people say, man, I'll interview folks and they'll say, hey, I want to be a leader, right? And I'm like, and so I try to take them. I said, well, do you own the outcomes, right? And it's like everybody wants to lead until you lead, till you have to lead, right? And then sometimes the things that are associated with leadership become a lot to kind of carry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think to me, getting that first check, getting that first payroll run, the responsibility of leadership, owning the outcomes, to me, all kind of come together as, a piece of entrepreneurship and, some of the core tenets that I think are responsible, at least been, pretty important in my journey.
Yeah. So you decided to, of course, after you graduated from DePauw, start this company to make Indiana home, to make Indianapolis home. And you didn't have to. I mean, you've grown a company that probably could be, I'm guessing, but you'll tell me, it could be headquartered anywhere, right? And but you've decided to raise your family here and to make Indianapolis and Indiana your home state and home base. What was it about our community that you said, this is where I'm going to plant my flag?
Looking back, I mean, I came out here in 91 to go to college, graduated in 95, went to work for Lilly. 30 years later, if you would have asked me that, no way am I in Indiana, right? Now, Indiana's evolved a lot. I mean, since, since then. So, I mean, there's a lot that has kind of grown up around us all here, which has been pretty exciting to be a part of. I'll often tell people 30 years goes by fast.
Yeah.
I'll meet kids now. I meet young people, 20-somethings, and I'm like, man, it's like snap of a finger, you're going to look up and you're going to be 50. I said, you start a company, you start working, you start having kids, you get caught up in, their lives and their responsibility, you get married, and, all those things, like a day becomes a week becomes a month, and all of a sudden you're looking back, a year, 10 years has passed, and, so, all of that's happening, and we're building this great business, and, it just seemed like, it just made a lot of sense to continue to stick with what worked.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, we made a lot of great friends here. right? And I mean, no matter what, everybody pretty much says that I run into in my circles is genuinely, it's pretty easy to meet people here in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
I mean, just even thinking back in our story, right? It's like, you and I just met on a random connection, and we're talking about doing business somewhere in some remote part of the world, and here we are, 20 years later, having this conversation.
Yeah,
and I don't think that organically happens as easy in maybe some of the larger cities, right? I think it's a little more difficult to kind of break into some of these little, circles. And so I think there's kind of a genuine nature to a lot of the folks. I mean, the folks who kind of pulled me under their wing here, that were some of the icons of Indiana business. I always throw out Bill Mays. Bill Mays, to me, I mean, he sat down and talked to me at a time when I knew he was busy. I had nothing to offer at all, right? And sometimes, I mean, I'll say, Bill gave me a contract for something that he did not need, right? Just because he knew I needed something to get me going.
Yeah.
And it was such an honor. I mean, he got like a Lifetime Achievement Award in New York. This group, the National Minority Supplier Development Council, gave him an award. And it was such an honor to sit there with him and Kristen,
that's neat.
20 or so years later after that first meeting.
Yeah.
And so, friends, just the community building, while we're here, and, mentors like that. You have kids and they start to get their own, priorities, objectives, and, so it just continues to make sense for me right now.
Well, I think you hit on what I actually think is our secret sauce. And that is the willingness and openness of people to get together, to take a meeting, to learn from each other. Bill Mays happens to be, he is an icon of this community, and he served on the IEDC board. Was one of Governor Daniels' first appointees back in 2005, and of course he said yes and was a great board member. Yeah. But I think that's our secret sauce. I mean, I always hear other communities that even in the Midwest that aren't as open and aren't as willing for people to take a meeting, and so I agree with you. Yeah. I think it's something that's special. If you think about where we need to grow as a community and as a city, and maybe it's a shortcoming, or maybe it's just an opportunity for growth. Is there anything that you say, gosh, this really sticks out as something we need to work on?
I mean, there's so many opportunities, right? I mean, there's so many things we're doing well at the same time. I mean, when you think of, our academic institutions, I mean, those are world class. I mean, the investment that we're making in healthcare right now is pretty world class. Sometimes I wish our politics, I wish our politicians could get along a little bit better. But I mean, I don't necessarily know if that's an Indiana problem. I mean, I think that's probably all over these days.
Yeah.
I mean, I do believe that, some of the K through 12, especially in the inner city, Indianapolis. I mean, I think there's a lot of, families that are struggling. And, I know there continues to be a lot of groups that really focus on, how do we make sure that, as Indianapolis, as Indiana does better, we make sure all communities can kind of benefit from that. And that's inner city, that's rural communities all over the state, that are struggling. So, continuing to invest in, making sure that K through 12 are present the very best opportunities to support our teachers and support students that are going through that. I think that's certainly an opportunity. Something else I'll say is that I remember a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to sit down with Governor Holcomb, and I was talking about Black business success stories in Indiana. And I told Governor Holcomb, I said, I was reviewing Black Enterprise Magazine, and every year Black Enterprise Magazine lists out the 100 largest Black businesses in the country. And I asked Governor Holcomb, I said, what percentage of those businesses would you say were from the state of Indiana? And I said, just random. And if I asked you that question, I'm not going to put you on the spot. If I said, but I'd venture to say you probably would be surprised.
Okay.
And I said 10% of the top 50 Black businesses were from Indiana.
Wow.
Okay. That did not include some businesses that I knew should be on the list, but did not submit their information.
Okay.
Right. So I said, man, you have this little success story here that I bet you most of the people in the State House don't know about. Right. And, what do we do when we know we have something that we're pretty good at? We make more of an investment and we figure out how do we create more of that, right?
Yeah, right.
And so I think there are like things like that.
That's awesome.
That we're probably unaware of, but
yeah, that's I'm glad you brought that to light. That's an awesome statistic,
right.
And one to be proud of, and one that we can grow. To your point,
absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's really neat. I appreciate you sharing that. So I wanted to ask you about, it wasn't long ago that BCforward acquired a publicly traded New York-based IT staffing firm called TSR Inc. Talk a little bit about that and how is it going since the acquisition?
Yeah. Well, TSR is a great company, and we typically look for growth in a variety of different ways. Most of our growth throughout our history has been relatively organic growth, kind of growing within, the natural structures that we had in place at BCforward. But, we started to learn more about TSR, and TSR had been around for over 50 years, right? This was a company that had went public back in the 70s. It was started by a family, and they had a tremendous client base in financial services companies. So a lot large banks kind of in and around, New York, New Jersey, a tremendous amount of experience in utilities, and so we just kind of felt like, man, there was a great synergy between kind of what we were doing and some of the things that we wanted to do and what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And they were kind of at a point where they were really too small to be public. And, so, they were kind of burdened with a lot of the overhead associated with being a publicly traded company, had a great leadership team, great setup, a great culture. These are like New Jersey guys, though, So it was, part of the kind of courting process, I kind of had to go down and meet these guys. And so they're kind of like, who's this guy from Indiana? So I had to remind them, I said, I'm from New York, right? So, there was, I think there was a connection, culturally when we kind of realized that we were kind of, grew up right across the river from one another. Right. But it's going great. TSR continues to run independent from BCforward. So we're really sister companies. They have a great culture, that and a great set of clients. And we just want to do everything that we can to help them be the very best company that they can. Yeah. We're continuing to be opportunistic and look for similar deals out there.
That's what I was going to ask. Is the strategy, is that part of your growth strategy? Maybe more acquisitions in the future? Is that possible?
Kind of looking at, hey, a house of brand or branded house. I'm kind of going through this right now. So, I think there are a bunch of different opportunities to kind of be additive to what we're doing for our customers. Right now we're looking at a couple deals in the AI space. All of our customers, are making heavy investments in AI. It's, part of, some of the investment that we recently made over in Hyderabad, India, was to really bolster our AI capabilities, not only here in the United States, but globally. So, we're looking at a deal in that space right now.
Oh, neat.
There's some stuff in cyber that we're also taking a look at. So, we're continuing to just try to stay very close to what our customers' needs are and just kind of making sure that we can be responsive.
That's exciting. That's really exciting. Well, I want to turn to the work that you and Darrianne have done in philanthropy, specifically at DePauw University at the Center for Diversity and Inclusion. Can you talk a little bit about that effort and kind of what motivated you both to step up and work with DePauw on that front?
Well, listen, obviously, if you know me, DePauw is a special place for me. I've had the opportunity to work with DePauw on a variety of different projects that, I've just been tremendously excited to just be a part of. I was asked to be on the board a few years ago. I had the honor to lead the search to bring their current president, Dr. Lori White, who I believe is the best college president in America. Obviously I'm biased, but she is great, and she's just doing some amazing things down there, and to kind of just be a part of the process to kind of bring her and all her talent to Greencastle has just been great. there was an opportunity, so DePauw used to have, they had an African American student house when I was there, right?
Sure.
And so, this was kind of a house where, DePauw was always known for being a very Greek institution,
Okay.
right? So, if you look at the history, a lot of sororities, fraternities were founded at DePauw, right? So, I mean, when you look all around the campus, there were these huge, beautiful houses, right, for these fraternities. And so sometimes some of the students, of color, African American students, if you weren't a member of one of those fraternities, sororities, and, on the weekend, where would you go? So you'd have the African American student house. Now, what was the African American student house? It was always kind of the house that was left over. Like, so, hey, where's the extra space that we have this year? Well, that became the African American student house, right? So I remember one time I was down there, I was driving around. I was like, oh man, went in the house. I think the furniture was the same furniture, that was there 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, I remember calling Darrianne. I said, man, let's give a little money just to clean this place up, right? And, we started talking about that and, kind of evaluating the cost and, started talking to the administration at the time. We said, hey, maybe we can do something a little bit bigger that ensures that we are, addressing the needs of the African-American student population or the Black student population there, but also, addressing the needs of maybe other affinity groups there, right? So we broadened the scope of that to be the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, which is kind of known as the CDI now.
Okay.
So when you go to the CDI now, this place is like the melting pot of the campus. Okay. And so there are so many affinity groups that fall through there on any given evening. I was in there one day and I saw some students in there, they were cooking. I was like, man, this is like these kids got their stuff together. I mean, it was like crock pot. I mean, it was like 15, 20 kids. And it was a group of Pakistani kids and they were in there and they were cooking like a traditional Pakistani meal. And I was like, give me a plate. Like it was, so you have that. You have first generation college students that are also I was like, hey, okay, what's this group over here? Like, oh, we're first generation college students, just kind of, it's just kind of just the place that we chill out. Right.
Okay.
And so, and so if you kind of you got international students, you got gay and lesbian student groups there. You got groups that have religious affiliations that kind of fall through. So it's truly this melting pot.
Yeah.
For so many different communities to just kind of find a space. And man, in this day and age of mental health, man, we have kids, we send them to high school, they leave and all of a sudden they go to these remote places like Greens and they're by themselves. And for a kid to just find community or find a crew or find just a posse or just a network of folks that they can say, man, every night I know I can fall through there and probably find someone that I have common interest with.
Sure.
And what's been cool is those groups mix it up too.
That's
right.
Great.
And they do so many different things, so many different programs, lectures that happen there. I think there's obviously a lot of conversation these days around, DEI.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, I think, DEI has been weaponized in and of itself to kind of just take on such a negative connotation. But I don't think anybody would argue with, hey, I just want people to find a home, right? You know what I'm saying? Right. And find a place that they can feel comfortable, regardless of who that community of people is. And that's really what the founding principles were for the CDI. So
that's neat.
And it's been exciting to kind of see, that place just continue to flourish on the Paul's campus.
That's fantastic. Well, I know family is really important to you. You and Darrianne have 4 daughters, and I've read that your house is full of Legos. You're a Lego family. Tell me, do you get involved in building Legos with your daughters, or is that just your daughters that?
Okay. So Lego has become it's kind of cool now. I think kind of growing up, Lego was this kind of
right.
this. Yeah. Corny thing, but now I see people like David Beckham kind of do Lego now. Nice. So there's some cool folks out there that are kind of into Lego these days. But so a few of my kids have really taken to it. And I remember during COVID, like me and my oldest daughter, who was home from college at the time, we got COVID. So we have a small little condo in Indianapolis. So her and I went to the Lego store, which we probably shouldn't have been out, but we masked up, went to the Lego store. We bought like the biggest Lego, which was like Millennium Falcon,
nice.
like 10,000 pieces. And like we had nothing else to do. So like on display in my office is like this massive 10,000 piece Millennium Falcon Lego, which is kind
That's
of
awesome.
like, our remembrance of that little period of time when we had COVID. So
That's
yeah,
cool.
we've done probably, dozens of Lego sets throughout the years. And yeah, I do have 4 daughters, aging from 22 down to 9. I mentioned Ellington earlier in the set, my youngest. And they're just brilliant, great human beings, all within their own right. And I say my proudest accomplishment, as a human being.
Now the women don't gang up on you or anything, do they?
Well, said, hey, there's no winning that conversation. So I'll just say, you already know the answer to that question.
Well, the Millennium Falcon story is so cool. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so I've got my own Star Wars collection. But I know I've seen before just how big that thing is, and that must have taken you a few days, more than a few days.
It's massive. It's like sitting way up in my office because I'm like I don't want anybody to touch this thing. Cool. So I don't think we'd ever be able to get it back together. But
that's cool. Well, Justin, we've made it to Off the Record Speed Round, where I ask you some quick questions, and you can give me as long or short of an answer, but most of them are quick questions. So I always finish the interview with these questions. Your favorite movie?
Ooh, my favorite movie. Okay, well, I got one, but my wife would be upset if I said that one. Man, I'm an Iron Man guy. I mean, Iron Man the first one.
Okay.
Avengers, the first one. That was probably one of my favorites. So like, the Marvel movies kind of all get me. Black Panther. So I know I'm not giving you one, but I'm giving you kind of a grouping, right?
Genre.
Yeah.
Favorite place to vacation?
Oh, we had a chance to go to Marrakesh. And it just absolutely blew me away. So we stayed at a fabulous hotel, the culture, the food.
Yeah.
That was great. So that list continues to evolve though.
For a musician, I bet you've got your favorite musical artist. Who's your favorite musical artist?
Oh, I got to go with Duke Ellington.
There you go.
So,
Stay consistent.
Duke Ellington, John Coltrane. Yeah. So yeah.
What's your favorite sport to watch?
Baseball.
Very good. A lot of people wouldn't say that today. That's
baseball.
Good.
Yeah, Yankee fan through and through.
Nice. What's the first thing you do in the morning?
First thing I do in the morning. Oh, my wife would be upset, but I probably pick up my phone. More times than not, it's probably because now I have college-age kids, so I'm just kind of seeing that I get a text from them last night that I kind of got to jump on, right? So
I get that.
It's kind of like, okay, no text from them, put that back down,
good.
And just kind of try to decompress and just think about what my day is going to be like.
What is the food that you can't live without?
Oh, food I can't live without. I'm still like, man, I'm New York pizza.
Are you?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you get a good slice of New York pizza, and man, can't beat that.
Pacers or Knicks? Since you're a New York guy.
Come on, Nate, how you going to do me like that, man? You're going to do me like that.
You're not answering too fast.
I mean, Mel Raines, Mel is like a good friend. Her and I serving a couple boards together. So I'm leaving that one alone.
Were you living in Indianapolis those years with the back and forth with Reggie Miller and Spike Lee? And I mean,
I'll tell you this one quick story. So a client invited me to go to the U.S. Open a couple years ago. So I walk in the suite, and who's there? Spike Lee, right? So so everybody's kind of introduced themselves, and I say, hey, where are you from? I was like, I'm from Indiana. Spike starts yelling, like in this like the U.S. Open, so it's kind of like quiet. Spike starts saying, this guy's from Indiana. And I was trying to tell Spike, and I'm actually from New York, but he wouldn't even let me get it out. He's like, this guy's from Indiana. He just kept going on and on and on. I was like, so
that's fun,
man. I mean, it's just So no, I lived all through that, right? Reggie Miller. I mean, I remember running into Reggie Miller when I was in high school. This is before Reggie Miller was the Reggie Miller we all knew today. He was at a little soul food restaurant called the Pink Teacup in New York, and I was like, he was like, hey, you coming out to Indiana? I was like, yeah, I'll be out there. Going to college. So yeah,
that's cool. That's cool.
Small world.
Well, maybe you can answer this one. Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
Come on, I'm an MJ all day.
I figured. Our generation tends to be MJ Michael Jordan. Best advice you ever received?
Oh, best advice I ever received. Well, to much whom is given, much is required. And that was Vernon Jordan, who's a DePauw grad.
That's right.
And, he told me that. So
that's great. Last question, advice for a young person who wants to start a business and become an entrepreneur. What's the best advice you'd give?
It's a marathon, not a sprint. And man, and I'm not a marathoner, but I've watched a marathon, on TV. And man, it's an endurance game. And you're gonna have some good days, you're gonna have some good miles, you're gonna have some tough miles.
Yeah.
And just kind of knowing that, man, over the long haul, if you can kind of stay in the game, those who stay in the game, eventually things, should work out for you.
100%. Yeah. Well, Justin, it's been awesome having you as a guest on the Indiana 250 podcast. I appreciate all that you do for our city, for our state, for your alma mater, for all the causes that you and Darrianne get behind. Thanks for everything, and thanks for being with me today.
Thank you, Nate.
Thanks.
Yep.
To learn more about other leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list, go to indiana250.com and look for a Page 2 feature each week in IBJ. We'll be back with the new Indiana 250 off the record conversation soon.